Anthony Davis, Michael Popok, Global AF is back. And we couldn't abandon our audience. We just had to get our act together and get back on the air. So much to talk about, Anthony, at the intersection of law, politics, and global socio-economic affairs, with the European Union banding together to stop a tyrant from threatening their very existence. No, this is not a World War II documentary. This is what's happening in response to the first 50 days of the Trump administration. As Trump attacks allies, he sides with our enemies. He sides with imperial dictators. He gets played by all of them. He loses the tariff war that he started before it even began. He emboldens leaders like Claudia Sheinbaum, who is mopping him up and bullying the bully in an amazing way. Trudeau, if they ran a vote again, I think the guy would get reelected based on how he's doing against Donald Trump. And then we've got what those closest to Donald Trump, how they're reaching out to what they consider to be their analog, the alt-right in Europe, led by the Teal PayPal mafia and Elon Musk. Let's break it all down for everybody. Welcome to Global AF. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Michael. It's interesting. You know the phrase "New World Order." Now, that was always, if you look it up on Google, it kind of talks about it being a conspiracy. And I used the phrase world order in a video last week, and YouTube actually put, an advisory on the video about New World Order, even though I didn't say New World Order. And I thought this is really interesting because this is basically what we're dealing with now. It is a New World Order. When you see America shift its position from supporting the Allies in Europe since 1941 when they entered World War II, to suddenly taking the side of the Russians in this war over Ukraine, which could now see this split, which is this close between Europe and America, and Elon Musk now throwing his weight behind the US exit from NATO. He actually posted on his platform X, doesn't make sense for America to pay for the defense of Europe. I mean, this is very serious. And for those of us in the US who, US-born people who've grown up in the United States, there isn't that feeling necessarily, unless you had family, grandparents, great-grandparents who were in the Second World War. There isn't that feeling that Europeans have of literally having their cities bombed to shit. And so I think that the reason that the Europeans are reacting in this way is because there is historic trauma, and they have to absolutely jump on this, because they don't want to make the same mistake as they did in 1939.
So we have the European Union holding secret and emergency meetings in order to commit to almost $850 billion US to replace the security safety that they expected from the United States. France is now offering their nuclear umbrella to protect Europe. Germany is being, I always get a little nervous when I start talking about a German leader talking about the unification of Europe, but they are. And we've chased our allies, Canada and Mexico, potentially into the hands of the Chinese when it comes to trade by starting a tariff war that not only no one wants, but the American manufacturing and farms sectors, it's going to devastate them.
Yeah.
Let me say this out loud. State the obvious. The American people cannot consume enough products and services made by the American economy to keep America afloat or its businesses afloat. That's why free trade is usually a good thing, both diplomatically and economically. Donald Trump sees, I don't know what he sees. He says he doesn't see free trade as a positive because he's against diversity. So he doesn't like people from other countries. He's a germaphobe and he doesn't like to travel. So that's who's running our country. When you were just outlining sort of what has just happened, I've seen a couple of comparisons that really strike home for me. One, it's like if Superman decided to go into business with Lex Luthor, And secondly, it is like The Plot Against America by Philip Roth, which is a historical fiction about what would have happened if FDR was beaten by Colonel Charles Lindbergh, who was a Nazi sympathizer. It's hard to believe, and an America firster. That sounds familiar. And if what would have happened is we'd all be speaking German right now. No pun intended. So that is, and The Plot Against America does have this kind of Nazi overtone, and there's this new romanticism and fascination among the inner circle of Donald Trump and Trump himself. Trump's family name is Trumpf. We know where they came from, and they have a sick fascination with dictators and Nazis.
And we know that Trump himself has a fascination with Adolf Hitler, reading Hitler's speeches, and it was rumored that, this was one of his hobbies. I can't imagine him reading anything, but if he's going to choose that, and experts have said that the way that Trump delivers speeches, repeating the same lies over and over so that they form part of the vernacular, the build the wall and the lock her up, that's all Hitler behavior from Hitler speeches. And so there are these connections. And of course, Elon Musk, who's pretty much running the federal government right now, Trump is golfing like it's a, national competition.
By the way, did you see the amount of money the American people, the bill that they're asked to foot every weekend because of his golf trips?
Yes, it was insane.
It's tens of billions of dollars already.
They're trying to look for fraud, waste, and efficiency, and it's like, well, just stop golfing, stay in the White House and be the president, and you'll save more money than Doge is finding stopping people in Africa from eating a solitary meal a week.
And maybe you don't have to touch our future and people's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans benefits. And by the way, he's fired more veterans. Yes. And Veterans Affairs benefits than any president in history, and they all voted for him in red states. So there you go for that. But maybe you would, if you didn't send Pete Hegseth down to Guantanamo Bay to watch 9 migrants land on a C-17 so that Laura Ingraham could get an interview, and he flew down on the equivalent of Air Force One. Maybe you'd have a couple of shekels left over to invest in the American people.
Talking of Hegseth, interestingly, it was announced, he took the flak for this, but really it was Donald Trump's direction to stop this intelligence sharing. And this is the other thing now that we are seeing, is that in one hand, Trump is being very woolly about his allegiance. Obviously, there was that scene where he ambushed Zelensky in the Oval Office with J.D. Vance. The whole thing was, ricocheted around the world as an example of how not to do diplomacy. But what goes with that is the stuff that they're not really talking about, which is, not funding Ukraine for the war effort anymore, not doing the intelligence sharing. Ukraine said that their drones are now around 20% less effective because they're not getting the intelligence. They're not actually getting the software, access to the software that enables them to be accurate with their bombs.
Well, there's 4 dead Ukrainians, at least, when Putin took advantage of the lack of intelligence sharing and slammed a missile into Zelensky's hometown and a hotel. And when Kellogg, the military attaché for the Trump administration assigned to this issue, when he was challenged about that, he said, well, it's Zelensky. He said this in front of the Council of Foreign Relations. It's Zelensky's fault. We're not sharing that. People are dying because they've decided to, as Kellogg put it, we need to hit the donkey in the head with a 2x4. He got hissed and booed at the Council of Foreign Relations when he said it was Zelensky's fault that intelligence had been cut off. The guy it's a president at war, as Zelensky put it, in a democracy in that region that the rest of Europe rallied around for a reason, because if Ukraine falls and it whets the appetite further of Putin, the imperial dictator of Putin, to roll his tanks, what's next? Poland? What's next?
Yeah. Well, Poland is definitely next. This is the concern. Putin wants the Soviet Union back again. This is how his plan has always been. You have to look at his history and his background, and I like looking at these old documentaries of Boris Yeltsin. There's always a skinny little Putin in the corner, kind of conniving Putin who was like ready to take over. He's a former KGB agent. He is extremely manipulative and he knows the long game and he plays the long game. And getting Trump elected was exactly what he needed in order to see this war, because Trump wants Putin to win the war in Ukraine because then he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. He literally is like, okay, because he said in that meeting, didn't he? He said, look, otherwise you're just going to have to fight it out and, then we'll kind of see what happens. That was him being like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. There is absolutely no moral duty. And then, of course, there was that line that J.D. Vance spun the other day about, getting the British involved and the Europeans involved, saying, well, bringing in soldiers who haven't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. And that was so insulting to the British and the Europeans, of course, because, the British had their troops in Iraq and in
Coalition
Afghanistan.
of the willing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And so, it is the lack of historical knowledge that makes these guys just, lose any respect that they might have started with.
Yeah, no, our European allies are going to come out stronger for this, but at the expense of America. I'm not talking about American hegemony. I'm not looking to reestablish the empire. However, all the things that went into are spreading from the perch of what the president, usually being the leader of the free world, is really over. Our brand of democracy, led by Donald Trump, this BS populist fascist thing, is not playing well on the road. And the Europeans realize they're going to have to go it alone economically, geopolitically, and militarily and security wise. That's going to strengthen them. I've said out loud, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a revote on Brexit and the UK didn't get back.
I've been discussing this in my family.
That's what I think.
Right. Because, part of the reason why I left the UK was because of Brexit. I was so sad about it. And I don't think that they will do that, but they will certainly do a military alliance.
Agree. All right.
With the UK.
Right. Because they really have to. And so what I've half joked in hot takes, but almost crying during it, is that Donald Trump should be complimented for uniting the world against the United States. I've never seen in 50 days. Right. So, I mean, and people that try, I just saw a good article, I think it was in the Times, might have been somewhere else, that said, MAGA and Republicans suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. Also, they keep claiming the Democrats do. They do. Yeah. And because they have bought into his destructive principles. This is we're not watching a Trump doctrine in foreign policy. What's the doctrine? A totally erratic, mentally unstable president. That's the doctrine. Tariffs, no tariffs, maybe tariffs. I don't know about tariffs. Yeah. Release the hostages or I'll bomb you. Forget it. I'm not going to bomb you.
I'll give you till April the 2nd because, I announced it, but I've realized that all these car companies are going crazy. So I'll reverse it for about a month.
And cars will probably carve you out. And then, and so people are like, I know friends like over a beer will say stupid things like, well, it's good. It keeps our adversaries off their toes. You never know what Trump. I said, that's not an F in foreign policy. No. And all that's doing is tanking Wall Street, because the last thing they like is an erratic fiscal and economic and monetary policy. Right. Ben on on Legal AF this weekend, he's got a theory. I didn't totally agree with him, but he has a theory that he's going to try now to take over the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell. And I said, I can tell you from what my knowledge is of people that are inside, that are former Wall Street people, the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary in particular, they've talked him out of doing that because he would immediately send the economy into an irretrievable tailspin. So he hasn't done that. That's why every time you see an executive order about, I'm going to put every agency under my greasy thumb, not the Fed. It's like a foot, like an asterisk.
And he admitted this week that there might be a recession. I mean, like he's finally said right. Initially, he was like, "Oh, there'll be a period of instability," and now he's saying, "Well," because he was asked, there could be a recession, and you could only blame Joe Biden for so long.
He pushed the American economy off the cliff in 50 days. When what he inherited Biden inherited from Donald Trump a moribund economy, actually, whose heart had stopped and needed to be defibrillated with several $1 trillion of a stimulus package, or you and I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
Okay. That's what Joe Biden did. Now, there were a couple of things that he couldn't control. One was growth was great, job creation, amazing. Price increase going to go along with fast job creation, and just the way it goes in economics 101. And he couldn't kind of get tamped down all in a 4-year period, and he got hammered for it. The Democrats got hammered for it, but there was no economy to speak of when Joe Biden came in. By contrast, when Trump got elected, the economy roaring, job creation roaring, stock market roaring, inflation heading down, right? Immigration kind of under control, and even at the border.
But isn't this the same as when Trump got in the first time and took the credit for Barack Obama's economy?
Absolutely.
Because remember, in Obama's first term, that was when we had the subprime mortgage crash. But then he turned it around, and everything was going in the right direction. In his second term, then Trump takes it over, and the trajectory did not change.
Obama, the Democrats don't get enough credit for what they inherit. When Obama came in, we had the banking crisis. If we didn't bail out the banks with Obama, that economy would have, if they had spent the trillions of dollars to bail out banks, our economy as we know it would have ended as Obama came into office. That was the big fight with, what was the comment by the late John McCain? The fundamentals of our economy are strong. Like, what are you talking about? The thing's about to go off the cliff. So he fixes it, gets it going, gets it roaring. Trump comes in, kills it with COVID. Biden comes in, gets it roaring. 50 days.
Trump comes in.
It's an art. It is. I'll give him credit. It is an evil art. A talent to be able to kill an American economy and take America out of the economy. Did you hear that they're planning on cooking the books with the commerce statistics?
Yes.
They're going to remove the U.S. government contribution to GDP, right? Which is the thing that helps keep it humming. We're going to remove it so they can blame the consumer and not blame the tariffs.
There's a great analogy for this. And I was reading about cruise ships in Miami, and apparently when they're traveling, they kick up sediment on the banks, and it's causing an ecological problem, massive ecological problem to local wildlife and fish. And so, the department that tests it, they're putting out these warnings and saying, what are we going to do about it? And so the Trump administration has come in, and guess what their solution is? They're going to stop testing.
Yeah, I was going to say, eliminate the regulator.
They're going to stop testing. Right. And I was thinking, this is a perfect analogy for how this Trump regime is operating. Right. It's the same as in COVID, where he was like, if we test less, we'll get fewer cases.
It's like this mentality. It's the old vaudeville joke. Doctor, when I do this, it hurts. Don't do that. Don't
do it. Exactly. So that is what we're dealing with. It's a bait and switch. It really is. It's a confidence trick. And he's going to do it not just for cruise ships in Miami, but he's going to do it around every single department. I mean, we've even heard it with this measles outbreak, and RFK Jr., I heard him yesterday talking about stuff.
Just take supplements,
saying we're going to be transparent about it.
Just take supplements. You'll be fine. You don't need
vitamin A. That's the solution to this.
That's all you need.
I want to talk about the Transatlantic Alliance, because this is what was put in place after the Second World War that would keep the world safe, right? It is there for a reason, that the US and Europe are not allowed to fall out. The Transatlantic Alliance is there to protect from there being a third world war.
We didn't accidentally. Article 5 of the NATO alliance wasn't a typo.
No.
It was purposeful.
Right. So you're not allowed to breach that contract. That is the deal. But of course, Donald Trump doesn't know what it is, doesn't have any point of reference, has no interest. And so he will break these conventions without even realizing. And now, because there are no adults in the room, there's no one to say, actually, Donald, you can't do that, so please don't announce it. This type of administration is a backtrack administration, because he's just going to say, he's in a monologue, he's just going to kind of spew out. And meanwhile, Europe is having to reposition all of its military. And so the other thing about the Transatlantic Alliance is that, aside from Ukraine getting rid of its nuclear weapons because part of this agreement was America would always protect them, is that so much of the UK and Europe's military capability is counting on American military equipment, on planes, for example, and even the software in the planes. So if the US sells planes to Europe, the Europeans are flying these planes, let's hypothetically call them F-16s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the software that is in them that enables them to do their reconnaissance and for them to store that data still belongs to the United States. I don't know if you know this. It's kind of interesting.
No, I'm not sure I knew that. Mm-hmm.
And so this breakdown of the alliance means that they're going to be flying planes and they're not going to be able to access the data.
No tech support.
Right. No tech support. And so this is the stuff that we don't really get to hear about. But this is the reality of this alliance, is that without America, Europe does not have not just the equipment, but also the technical know-how. The US is so advanced with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it is so integrated into the European systems, or the European systems are so integrated with American systems that without each other, the Europeans are going to have to basically start over.
And the flip side of that is, if we don't have their intelligence gathering, if we don't have the Five Eyes and things like that, that help keep America and American interests safe. I mean, for instance, Trump is in the process, because it's just a cost-cutting thing for him, in closing consulate and after consulate after consulate around the world and diplomatic missions. And you know who's going to end up, I think, in the next week or two, having more consulates and diplomatic missions around the world than America? China. And their police state, they have police stations in, like, they have one in America. They had one in Chinatown at one point until they got busted by the Biden feds. So China is stepping in to the breach created by the withdrawal of America in the last 50 days, as they have. They are supporting the Caribbean, Africa, parts of Asia. China is, and we're not.
This is the USAID thing, where Trump didn't realize that USAID didn't stand for aid, that it's actually international development. So he probably read it as US aid. I don't want to give aid or foreign aid, but international development, that bit of it is the bit that China is going to step in and infiltrate.
Oh, 1,000%. Look, there's a reason US aid was a part of the State Department. It was an arm of diplomacy, all right? And behind every contract and every dollar spent abroad for humanitarian purposes, not just for altruism, it was to turn people towards the West and away from the East.
Yes.
And right? Okay.
Well, for kids to grow up thinking that America has helped them.
Absolutely.
I saw that picture of those kids with the backpacks. Did you see that? 3 backpacks that said a gift from USAID on their little school bags.
Right.
And we're educating these children.
Yeah, I just want to finish the one point about the aid. And behind every dollar, that $50-60 billion, not the $2 billion that's at stake in that one lawsuit, because that's for contractor payments or for services rendered and goods already supplied. I'm talking about the overall package. Behind that is primarily U.S. jobs and U.S. companies supplying that aid. So it wasn't just, it was also an extension of commerce.
Yes.
All right. And promotion. It's not just desalination plant.
Yeah. When we send food, where's that food going to come from?
Right. It comes from the farm belt of America.
That's right.
Yeah. So it is well,
it's a false economy to shut it down, because you lose influence on the world stage.
Absolutely. Well,
and he doesn't get that.
No, he pulled the oars in. It's all about America first. He doesn't realize, literally, we can't go it alone. What did Tom Friedman say in his book 20 years ago? The earth is increasingly flat, hot, and small. I forget. I'm butchering it, but meaning you can't. I mean, I saw a comment. You literally, no one country can build the iPhone. Even America can't build the iPhone alone with all the constituent parts of it that come from the global economy and the global supply chain. And
look at Boeing for an example, right? The great American company, and half the parts come from China,
right?
You know, so it might say Boeing on the outside of the plane, but the inside of the plane is and a lot of these, because of supply chain issues, you know, these companies are going to be stuck, absolutely stuck, because of these decisions that Trump is pulling. Can we finish by talking about Nazism? Because this is something that
where we started.
It is where we started. And, you know, I love to, my story arc always likes to make a full circle. And that is that it's not something that people want to say out loud, but the evidence is very clear. When you've got Elon Musk, who's now running the federal government, unofficially, officially trying to get the far-right Nazi party in Germany elected. They lost, incidentally. They came second, and the conservative who won now is very much on the progressive side of the aisle. But when you've got that going on, when you've got the, you know, this far-right Christian nationalism, this movement, you've got these Nazi salutes happening on multiple occasions. Steve Bannon, of course, as well as Elon Musk in recent weeks, but Laura Ingraham did one previously. I mean, you know, it's almost like if they could, they'd just do this stuff all the time. And my fear is that what we are actually seeing with America repositioning itself with the Kremlin is we're seeing the rise of Nazism, if not in name, but certainly in ideology. And I think that Trump is all for that. You know, I genuinely think they hate anybody who is not white, kind of Aryan. They're obsessed with eugenics. They're going to be spending government money on kind of, you know, this eugenic work that they're obsessed with. You know, this is no different to the genocide that Adolf Hitler brought about.
Yeah. When I hear, you sent me this before we started, when I hear or read Peter Thiel,
yes,
who is basically the Svengali or the guru over J.D. Vance and by extension Don Jr., when he says things like, we have to start thinking outside the Overton window. I'm like, okay, wait. The Overton window is a concept of what is politically acceptable at any given time for a reason. And he's saying, we gotta get outside the Overton window. We gotta go politically unacceptable. And that is at the foundation, the disruptive anarchist of Donald Trump's movement, because they want Donald Trump's is a short timer. He's got, in many ways, he's got a very short time horizon. He needs to do maximum destruction in the shortest amount of time. He understands that. He doesn't care about the economy, and he will sacrifice it on the altar of what he's trying to accomplish, which appears to be the complete destruction of the relationship between the American people and its government, the accountability between the government and the American people, and trying to implement every aspect of Project 2025, which has all been, you know, I guess an interesting cocktail party chat or tabletop exercise, but I really didn't want it implemented in my government, you know, alongside what's supposed to be a constitutional republic and a democracy. But they're trying to implement. They think they got one shot at employing all of these themes and theories of theirs, social theories of theirs, and it's while Donald Trump is still, you know, between now and the midterms. And the question I have for you is, how much of what he's doing now do you think is irretrievably broken, that can't be fixed by both a midterm election, a totally rejecting and renouncing Trump, and or the next presidential election? Can we fix it?
I've been thinking about this. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer, because, of course, some policies can be fixed, but you can't, you know, all the federal workers that got fired and departments shut down, you can't bring them back to work overnight. You know, a lot of them will have either found other work, or they would have moved on, or they would have relocated, or, you know, so there's that kind of federal worker aspect. But also, I don't know that that the Republicans are going to make room for another legitimate election ever again. And that's not a kind of doomsday answer. It's the reality is that Trump is the kind of person who is going to come up with a reason not to hold midterms. And he's probably going to do it in a kind of warlike way. He's going to say, okay, so now this war is happening and we're involved and it would be wrong to hold elections, right? Basically the thing that he accused Zelensky of not doing, which is having elections during the Ukraine-Russia war. They'll come up with a reason not to hold midterms. So there's either that, or I'm very much in the camp that Trump...
By the way, just to comment, I don't think he's got 5 Supreme Court justice votes for that.
I would like to think that
he might have 4.
Right. Yeah,
I don't think he's got 5.
Amy Coney Barrett, as we know, she's now become a bit of a loose cannon.
I don't think he's got 5 to do that.
Right.
But I hear you.
Right. And then the other thing is, I am not a conspiracy theorist about the last election, but I am a realist about the voter suppression and the purging of votes and the disinformation campaign that helped Donald Trump get elected.
Mm-hmm.
And that will keep happening. And I could argue that if there were midterms, that Trump would actually win with an even higher proportion of the vote. And I think that you and I, we do live in a bit of a progressive bubble. And I try to read as much as I can from this kind of far right Trump movement. And they are loving what he is doing. To the detriment of their own lives. They think that it is brilliant. What Musk is doing is amazing. Everything that Trump is saying is exactly what they want to hear. And sure, we're hearing about some veterans who are losing their jobs and therefore they're at town halls. They're starting to kind of shout back, but they're now banning town halls so people don't get the right of reply. So my fear is that he actually could turn out to be more popular in a midterm.
Yeah, let me throw the counterbalance to that. I've run into enough people who voted for Trump where I'm living now who have tremendous remorse.
Yeah.
And have even said that this is not what I voted for. I've had them text me. Is
that about Musk specifically? Because
it's about everything. About you. I mean, it depends on what generation they are. The ones in their 70s are appalled about what's happening in Europe and what we're doing to our allies, and told me this is not what I signed up for. Some are commenting on the economics of it all, and that's not what I signed up for. There's a lot of quiet. There's like a quietness about, sure. There's the cocky people running around with their red MAGA hats and down Fifth Avenue in New York. And like, whoa, hey, everybody. And, every other day it's another executive order about let's go after Columbia University. Let's go after this law firm. Let's go after this DEI. I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I read that the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, took down photos of Enola Gay. That's the famous plane.
Well, because their software identified the word gay.
Yeah, that was the name of the pilot's mother that dropped the bomb.
Because they're using algorithms.
Was that Hiroshima?
That's right. And they're using algorithms to make all these changes en masse.
How'd the Tuskegee Airmen photos come down then?
Right.
Because they're black? Yeah. I mean, so I think that when you cancel town halls because you're afraid to meet your constituents and you're a congressperson running every couple of years, I think you get paid back pretty quickly at the midterms. Now, you're right. I don't like the fact that the Republicans have spent a considerable amount of time trying to get control of election boards and Secretary of State positions and those that, and they have control of more state houses than the Democrats do. There's 17 completely blue states, but the rest are red, or at least one or two of the three branches are controlled by Republicans in other states. So the only thing that gives me, I'll end it on this note. I am getting a lot of comfort from the fact that, as I predicted, there would be 2 to 3 lawsuits a day filed. We're up to over 100 lawsuits. It's not quite, it's about 2 a day in 50 days. We've had about 5 preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders per week. We have had 3 cases go up to the United States Supreme Court already. We've had several appellate decisions, and the progressives, moderates, and fair-minded people led by the public interest groups, the NGOs, the attorneys general, and the like are batting about 900. Now we got to see The rubber meets the road when we get to the Supreme Court. And if I'm right about Amy Coney Barrett, where when it comes to presidential power, she is not and will not be an adherent of the unitary president theory, the way that Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh are, then, and I don't think Roberts really is either. It's really a myth, as Judge Beryl Howell just wrote a couple of days ago in her scathing opinion about Donald Trump. It's going to rapidly get to the Supreme Court. And I think you're going to see more 5-4s about presidential power the way we want it to be, as a check and a balance, or as Louis Brandeis wrote in a very famous dissent in the 1920s. I'm paraphrasing. There is the friction between the three plates of our government is the checks and balance. You don't want frictionless. You don't want efficient presidential power. Okay. Because that is an autocracy. That is a dictatorship. It is the friction that we want to have. And so I think we're going to be seeing more friction led by Amy Coney Barrett and even John Roberts about, not about a lot of things, but about presidential power.
So maybe they regret their immunity ruling. That would be interesting. Did you see the look that Amy Coney Barrett gave him at the inauguration?
I didn't think, look, she looked like she ate a bad oyster. So did John Roberts, by the way. I didn't think he loved being patted on the belly or whatever that was supposed to be. But if you go back, everyone's like all jumping on Amy Coney Barrett on the MAGA side, calling her Amy Coney Barrett. Did anybody know she's got Haitian adopted children? I'm like, oh, here we go. She doesn't have any pets either. Is that the problem?
Yeah. She ate all of them. That's why.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But if you look at Kavanaugh, he didn't look that happy to be there either.
Yeah, I mean, it was cold. Maybe we can just,
Yeah, she's not going to side with him on presidential power, and she's going to turn and fire back, as she has against Alito and Thomas. Now, not on other issues. I'm not saying she's covering herself in glory. I want to make sure the audience doesn't misunderstand me. I'm not saying on things that matter, like reproductive rights, about criminal immunity, about separation of church and state, that she's on the right side of the angels. She's not. But if you're talking to me, as we've kind of been talking about, an out of control rogue president, what is she going to do when it comes to presidential power under the separation of powers and under supremacy clause? I think she's going to end up in the right place for us. Question is Roberts, because she's just the fourth vote. We need a fifth vote, and that's going to have to be Roberts. We can't count on Kavanaugh. Gorsuch has so far run to the right, alt-right, that he is the heir apparent to Alito and
But
Thomas.
It's the alt-right that I worry about, because that is the through line with all of this. Call it Nazism, call it the alt-right, call it the white supremacists and the eugenicists. This is a theme. And when Pete Hegseth went to the Munich Security Conference and said to the Europeans, you need to be more welcoming of extremist parties, I was like, okay, this is a setup. Like, this is a plan. And so the only shining light on the horizon that I see is that what's happening in America is going to prevent other countries from falling foul of this extremism too, because Musk did not succeed in getting the AfD elected in Germany. I think he's going to try and do the same in the UK with Farage and the Reform Party.
The guy in Argentina fell for crypto.
Correct.
He's going to get run out on a rail.
But the example now is going to be set. And you remember, these leaders around the world, they're much smarter than Trump and his team. And so they're able to take these historical references, see the direction that things are going, and make sure that their country doesn't fall foul of an authoritarian like Donald Trump.
I love doing the show with you, Anthony. We got to do it once a week. Global AF here on the number one Midas Touch Network. Anthony's got a whole bunch of shows. Why don't you tout them a little bit for people? I don't know how they would only know you from this, but if they did, what else do you do for Midas Touch?
Well, 5 Minute News, we have daily hot takes, which you can find on the 5 Minute News channel or on the Midas Touch channel as well. On Wednesdays, Uncovered with Ron Filipkowski. And then on Sunday, I host the Weekend Show, where we have long-form conversations, well over an hour, with experts who really bring a fresh perspective to some of the biggest stories of the week. So
and
that's
Anthony
where
and
you'll
I,
find me.
yeah, and Anthony and I started years ago with crossover episodes where I went on his shows and he went on mine. Legal AF every Wednesday and Saturday on the Midas Touch Network. Hot takes about every hour at the intersection of law and politics on the Midas Touch Network. Got a new channel called Legal AF that I curate. Come on over there, hit the free subscribe button. We're going to roll the odometer over 500,000 this weekend, and that's all because of you. And then I've got a new podcast on Tuesday nights called Popok Live. What else?
As long as it's got your name in the title, that's all that matters.
I'm running out of gas on the creative titles. Popok Live. Yeah. I joke, it's like Kimmel Live, except without Jimmy, on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Midas Touch Network. So until our next Global AF coming up next week, Anthony Davis and Michael Popok.